Adam's gaming PC has started to regularly blue screen.
Oh, you don't say. So it's been, the Windows installation has been there for 6 months or more?
I have absolutely no idea what to do about it.
Blow out the dust.
Oh, yeah. All kidding aside, when I last regularly used Windows, and we were talking before even the bootleg started, Marco and I were, that I haven't regularly used Windows in like a VM anyway since like 2018. And I don't think I've had a Windows installation since like the early 2010s. Like I think I went maybe even earlier than that, like late aughts, early 10s. So it's been a long time since I've used Windows for more than literally 5 minutes. But when I was a devout, or maybe avid, I guess I should say, Windows user, it used to be, the rule of thumb was every 6 months, you destroy everything and put it back where it was, and start anew. So you would clean out all the cruft and get all the junk out. Now, it would not surprise me if that is not at all the case today. But how long has Adam's computer been operational?
That was Tiff's first gaming PC from like 2.5 or 3 years ago, something like that. And so there's a number of factors here. So number one, it was very well spec'd at the time. It has the mobile NVIDIA 2080. So it's actually a pretty well spec'd computer for, whatever, 2 years ago, whenever we bought it. The downside of the 2080 in a laptop, and whatever that giant version of it was to begin with, is that it's a very large, very hot running GPU. And so already I'm thinking, oh no, this laptop that worked totally solidly for, 2 years, and then all of a sudden has started like blue screening regularly while playing games, like, I don't feel great about that from a hardware perspective. But then I'm thinking like, well, if it is something stupid and software related, I'll feel really dumb if we ended up replacing it or somehow getting it serviced. I don't even know how it would do that. And I'm so far from the PC world at this point. I have no idea. Like, can I sell this? Can I trade it into somebody?
That's the most Marco answer is, screw it, sell it and get a new one.
You can sell anything that someone's willing to buy. I don't think you need permission from or knowledge of the PC market to do that. You can just put things for sale. I mean, you just explained how to sell things on eBay. This is a thing. You can sell it on eBay.
Yeah, but like if the GPU might be flaking out, like I can't really in good conscience sell that to a person. Like if there was some kind of like trade-in thing, I could do that, but
you don't know that the GPU is flaking out. You're just speculating. It occasionally blue screens, but that could be anything.
It regularly blue screens. And like, it's so funny, like, because I'm so far from using Windows regularly. I mean, the last time I used Windows regularly, the version I used was XP. I never used Vista or anything after it until getting these gaming PCs, and we literally use them only for gaming. So they're basically consoles to us. We open them up and launch Steam or the Minecraft launcher and go from there, and that's about all we do on them. And so it's funny, like, all these years I hear. You as nerds, you always hear stories of people in your life, and you're like, oh, I don't want to upgrade to the latest software. It's going to break everything. And meanwhile, these PCs, they have Windows 10, I think, on them, and they've started asking very aggressively for us to upgrade to Windows 11. And I'm thinking of this, like, from my point of view, like, why? Why would I want to touch anything? It works, mostly. It works now.
Except
Why?
the blue screens.
Well, yeah, okay, fair enough. But the other two, they work totally fine. So it's like, why would I want to do a software update if everything works? Whatever it's adding, I couldn't possibly care less about. Like any features it's adding to Windows, I don't even know. I don't care. These things are only gaming consoles to us. And so like the last thing I want is to upgrade my version of Windows, which like, best case scenario, nothing about my life changes. That's the best case scenario. And there's lots of worst case scenarios where something that worked before doesn't now. Like, and I'm realizing like this is how regular people have thought about computers forever. Like, it's so kind of funny and sad. Like, first of all, how many people never update their software for this very good reason of like, you know what, I did it once, it broke stuff, I was burned, and I don't want to do it again. And asking analytically like, what's this thing going to do for me? And then also like, how much hardware, especially in the PC world, let's be honest, how much hardware that's been perfectly fine has been replaced due to software bugs, and the person was just like, look, I can't afford to or don't have the skills to figure this out. I'm just going to buy a new one. like I can't tell you how many, like when I was in the PC world, I'm sure you both have seen this. I can't tell you how many PCs I've saw people replace that were just like, oh, it's old and slow because it was full of spyware. And like if you could have just reformatted and reinstalled Windows on it and it would have been fine. Like the hardware was fine, but people like so much PC hardware has been discarded and replaced over time that was totally 100% fine because people were misdiagnosing software problems for hardware problems, or that was the easiest way out of the problem for them, or the fastest, or the only thing they knew they could do, whatever it is. And here I am, like, waffling over that same dilemma, like, what do I do about this damn computer? Like, it's unreliable. Do we replace it? It seems kind of wasteful to replace it at this point. But
why aren't you using the old ways? Just wipe it and reinstall. I mean, that's a reasonable first step, especially if the only thing you ever do with it is game. Well, everything is on Steam or whatever. It's not like you need to preserve anything. Wipe and reinstall, and if that cures it, then yay, it was some weird software thing that you didn't have to figure out. But at the very least, do that, right?
Well, so I'm thinking of that, and that might be what I do next. But like, I don't know how to do that anymore. Like, I have no idea how to do that. I don't know where games are storing their files. I have no idea how to preserve like all the the progress Adam's made in his games.
Well, that's why Steam is good. I mean, we talked about Steam before. What does it bring to you? For Steam, at least, you don't have to worry about that because Steam will take care of it all. Pretty much everything has cloud sync saves, and all the games obviously themselves are on Steam. Minecraft, I don't know the answer to that, but I assume Microsoft does a reasonable job. But if you had individually installed a bunch of games, yes, that's where you'd be. But still, I'm sure you know, you can reinstall Windows without erasing the hard drive.
Honestly, I don't even know how to do that. Like, I don't even, like, I know there's probably some kind of,
probably
like,
a wizard for it.
I know, I probably, like, hold some key command at boot, and it probably has its own, like, system recovery thing.
And then you'll see a big DOS screen with white text on a black background. They'll tell you to hit F2 if you want to do this, and F3 if you want to do that, and you'll feel like you're using modern technology as you look at your drive letters.
Yes. Let me jump into my BIOS, that's where I see my RAM count up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and by the way, if you had said okay to that Windows 11 thing, you just would have found out that you don't have TPM 2.0 and you can't upgrade to Windows 11 anyway.
Well, I don't even know. Is that trusted platform module? Is that we actually did that?
Windows 11 requires TPM 2.0. You probably have it. I'm just making a joke, and I'm kind of bitter because I couldn't update it. I was willing to update my Windows gaming PC installation, which is an external SSD that I plug into my Mac Pro. It has I think I have Windows 8 on it. No, I must have Windows 10. Yeah, I have Windows 10 on it, and I was like, oh, I'll upgrade to Windows 11. What the hell? And it said, no, sorry, you don't have TPM 2.0. And then I did all this Googling to see, does the Mac Pro have something that can fool the Windows into thinking it's TPM 2.0? It says Xeon. I don't know. And I gave up. So I'm stuck on Windows 10 as well.
I remember when the TPM stuff was first floated, and this was back when I was using PCs, and the, let's say, the PC enthusiast community was not very thrilled with the idea of basically like DRM support in hardware in our computers. And it's funny to think back, like now in today's world, we carry around these phones and we have tablets and we have computers. All of them have hardware DRM support deeply. Like, there's so much hardware DRM support. Everything with an HDMI port has hardware DRM support. Like, it's just so much hardware DRM everywhere in all the devices. And we just, like, not only did we lose that fight, we were annihilated in that fight, and like no one cared.
Not really, because part of it, the main benefit we get from TPM stuff and all the secure stuff that we have on even Macs today and iPhones and everything is not the one that the TPM, the anti-TPM people will complain about. They're like, oh, this is going to put DRM and everything, and we're not going to be able to share all our songs through Napster and something. They would spin out all these things about how it's going to make it more difficult to pirate stuff and make our software not ours or whatever. But the actual main important function of all these things is to provide a chain of trust for booting, so that the machine knows that it's booting something that is trusted, and that chain of trust has to go all the way down to the hardware, right? To try to make it, it's much harder, not impossible because there are bugs in these things, but much harder to sort of like get a rootkit in there that even if you wipe the OS, you're still infected, right? And that whole secure boot thing that's on the modern Macs, it's on all our iOS devices and iPads and everything like that. That is a thing about being confident that you're running the OS you're thinking you're running, which no one has a complaint about. Everybody wants that. No one wants to be, rootkitted or exploited in a way that's like deep in your hardware. But in theory, that same hardware could be made to like, oh, this program won't run unless it checks for a secret key that we embed in the secure enclave equivalent in the TPM, blah, blah. And that just didn't really happen. plain old normal software-based DRM like FairPlay or whatever the hell Apple calls their modern one, we had that back then and we have it now. And that's mostly all Apple uses for this type of thing. Like all the exploits on the iPhone and everything aren't about like, oh, I can't sideload it because Apple has encryption. It's like, no, if you jailbreak the OS, you can sideload whatever the hell you want. And the jailbreak doesn't involve, well, sometimes it involves breaking the hardware level or whatever. But the slippery slope fantasies of TPM and having this security hardware on all our devices, the dystopia it was going to bring, it didn't bring it. All it brought us was secure boot, which is the thing we all like. The dystopia of DRM and everything doesn't require that hardware. It just requires people being annoying and stupid with their, with how they sell things. And people still do that all the time. Copy protection, DRM on, so music is DRM free, but Apple's iTunes movies are still not DRM free for some stupid reason because it prevents piracy because everyone knows you can't find movies on the internet. Thanks, Apple. That DRM made sure that no one will ever pirate a movie again. Success. No, what it did was it made it so I can't take screenshots of movies to make jokes on Twitter. That's what the DRM did. That's what we should have been fighting about. But that didn't require TPM. That just requires stupid software. Anyway, rant over.
I have a tangentially related question, which I'm now totally derailing the conversation, but
this conversation was never railed, Casey.
When there's something like, let's say something that's exclusive to Disney Plus, I don't know, like Hamilton a year ago, and there exists on the back of falling off the back of trucks, there exists a copy of Hamilton. How are those captured? Like, are people playing this on some sort of like TV and then using like some illicit HD capture card that doesn't respect DRM or something? Like, how does that work?
No, that is very weak sauce piracy. You don't want to take an encoded file of some kind, decompress it and play it, then send it over a wire and then try to capture it.
Agreed, but like, how else do you do it though?
Do people use like HLS hacks, or doesn't HLS have DRM like optionally?
So there's a million ways to pirate things, obviously. I think one of the most common used to be back in the day when we had physical media was they would send screener DVDs to everybody.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And they would just get the actual digital files off of there, and then they started watermarking them and stuff like that. Most streaming services either used to or still have a way to send the actual encoded file in pieces and you can just sort of intercept those pieces and stick them all together, probably with FFmpeg. Kind of like the way you do for the Keynote streams, right? If you can get the data as it would come into the decoder to go onto your screen, capture it that way, you don't have to play it and then recapture it.
I mean, I think this is how. So I'm actually talking a little bit outside my comfort zone, believe it or not. But if I were to download something from like NBC.com, for I don't know, for example, like This Is Us or something like that, like I could use hypothetically, YouTube DL or what is it, YTDLP is the blessed version now, and I can log into my Verizon Fios to show that I have access to this thing, and it does magic, and I know that HLS is involved, although now you know everything I know about HLS, but one way or another, it does magic to do, I think, exactly what you're describing, John. But I had assumed and presume that it is not quite so simple for like a Disney Plus or Netflix is another great example. Like, I wonder how those are captured. If a reasonably mature tool chain like YouTube DL can't do it, which I don't think it can.
Well, I mean, the final way is just break the encryption. I mean, it's easier said than done, obviously, but like it only takes one person to do it. And, obviously DCSS broke the DVD encryption ages ago, but every one of these things that has some kind of DRM thing is crackable. And getting back to the TPM thing, maybe if there was a mandatory hardware component, it would be slightly harder to crack these things. And I say only slightly because there's lots of security-related hardware that is just so thoroughly broken. Like I think Intel stopped shipping. They announced they're going to stop shipping or stop supporting SGX, which is one of their secure enclave things, just because it was so thoroughly and massively broken. And when it's in silicon and a bunch of chips, you just have to basically say, yeah, that's over now. We're not doing that anymore because it's so thoroughly broken and you can't change it because it's in millions of chips. And so it's like, that's not a thing anymore, right? I wish DVDs had done that, but that industry moves slower. But yeah, you can, crack the encryption like they say in the movies. Once someone gets through, it's open season and everything. I think FairPlay was cracked pretty early on too. I don't know if the current version of FairPlay is, but that's the final way to do it. It's like, you've got the file somewhere. If I can download it in Disney Plus, it's like, oh, but it's encrypted on your iPad. How are you going to play it? Oh, we've broken that encryption already. And so there you go.
All right, so where were we? So how are you fixing your computer?
We were pirating movies, which is not possible because Apple puts DRM and everything.
Right. And because of TPM, I can't reinstall Windows possibly on
Exactly.
I have no idea.
I mean, people complain about that, but I think pretty much every modern PC supports TPM 2.0. It was just people with some older PCs or like enthusiast setups that didn't have TPM that are suddenly locked out of Windows 11. It's like, why do you even care? Like, I don't know. But anyway, it was a controversial move. Anytime anything obsoletes hardware in the PC space, someone complains.
Yeah, I would imagine that's not going to be my limiting factor here. My limiting factor is going to be, A, am I ever really going to like figure out how to reinstall Windows on this laptop? And then B, am I going to actually want to spend probably a day? Like it's not going to be a small operation for me because like I haven't done this in how many years? I mean, 20 years maybe? Like it's been a long time. So and I'm sure everything is like I'm sure all the crappy stuff is the same as it was 20 years ago, but I'm sure a lot of the other stuff is totally different. And so I'm going to have to like relearn the entire process. And it's just like, this is why people buy new computers when they don't have to, because that's honestly an idea that if this computer was a little bit older, I would probably strongly consider this idea. And if there was an easy way to like trade it in somewhere, I would probably strongly consider that idea, but it's not, and it's not. And so I have to now figure out like, oh, how the heck do I do this?
It's probably easier than it was.
And then how do I put on like all the drivers and everything? I don't want to. Who wants to deal with that? Who has time for that?
Yeah, but I say if you just reinstall Windows, you won't have to reinstall all the drivers. They'll still be there, I think.
Oh, I doubt that very much. But I don't know. I mean, I'm probably going to have to like find some like me of today, like teenage me who like people I used to.
Guess what? That's Adam.
I know. No, like people used to pay me like $100 to reinstall Windows on their PCs. Like, you know, adults would like when I was in high school because like, and now I understand why.
Adam will probably give you the family rate.
Yeah, right. But now I totally understand why. Like, if I could hire some kid to come here and just do this for me and it would work for $100, I would totally do that because
I'd do it.
That would save me a whole day. All right, come on over.
I mean, travel expenses are an issue.
I'll pay the ferry. That's that's it. You're on your own for gas. We are sponsored this week by Squarespace. Start building your new website today at squarespace.com/ATP. Enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Make your next move with Squarespace. Squarespace makes it very, very easy to make awesome websites. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a server administrator. You don't have to know anything about setting up any of the tech. All you got to do is go to squarespace.com/ATP next time you want to build a website and start a free trial. And then you're going to be able to play with their amazing, easy-to-use, intuitive tools. Everything is visual. Everything is drag and drop and live previewing. You can customize it to your heart's content so it can look like your site, your brand, your theme, not just like, you know, some cookie-cutter thing that every other site looks like. You can really customize it to make it your own, all with no coding required anywhere. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to be a designer. You don't have to be a web, whatever we call ourselves these days. You just have to know how to use Squarespace, and it's super easy. They do have incredible support if you ever need it, but frankly, you probably won't. You can buy domain names there and have it all under one roof if you want. They have awesome automatic setup for all that stuff. It's just wonderful. You can set up simple sites like, you know, simple blogs or a couple of pages of info, or you can set up stuff that's more complicated, things like galleries, storefronts, podcasts, calendars, stuff like that. I've done a lot at Squarespace, and it's super easy. And so many people that I've been able to like make a website for them and then hand it off to them, or just send them straight there and have them do the whole thing. It's just fantastic. So once again, start your free trial site. Next time you want to build something at squarespace.com/ATP. There's no credit card required. You don't have to worry about like fretting to cancel or anything like that. No credit card required. Just build your site. And when you decide to sign up after that, and I'm sure you will because it's that good, make sure to head back there, squarespace.com/ATP, and use offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase. That's squarespace.com/ATP. Offer code ATP for 10% off your first purchase. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show. Make your next move at Squarespace.
All right, we should probably start the show. And let's do that with some follow-up as we are contractually obligated to do. John Sambakos has a picture for us with regard to their printer. And oh my gosh, this is very distressing.
Yes, this is the his HP PhotoSmart 3100 Dexter Murder Room version. This is an inkjet printer. We will put a link to the tweet, and maybe Marco can make this chapter art, or maybe not. You never know until you look. Go look at the chapter art. If your podcast player doesn't support chapter art, try using Overcast because it does. Inkjet printers are a mess inside, but turns out Richard Smith has a picture of the inside of his printer, and it happens to be the printer that Marco loves so much. His HB M553 inkjet, color inkjet, whatever, and it's a disaster inside there too.
It's a laser. It's a color laser. It's massive. It's amazing. How can you think that's an inkjet?
No, I'm saying look at the picture. Look at the show notes.
No, I saw. Yeah.
It's a mess.
There's a little bit of magenta in the area.
A little bit.
A little bit? Come on, man.
I mean,
It's
this is
more
what
than a
I'm
little
saying. When you
bit.
look inside a printer and it looks like, an ink murder room, how does a paper pass through this and not come out streaked with every color under the rainbow? But apparently it does. Apparently the paper path is clean, but everything else is just destroyed.
Oh yeah, those were slightly traumatizing. And speaking of traumatizing, let's see who this was. This was Brian Almeida tweeted at me earlier today, and apparently there's a YouTube channel. What is this called? Northridge Fix, and I believe this is a repair shop in Northridge, California. And the proprietor will repair things and do videos showing him repairing it. And today, or actually yes, I think it was literally today, the proprietor repaired. Guess what? A broken USB-C connection on an LG Ultrafine 5K monitor.
Mine works fine. What are you talking about? You must be wrong. These always work.
So anyway, the monitor does not make an appearance, but the motherboard does. And in the span of about 15 video minutes, this gentleman, and I found this fascinating because my electronics experience was a little bit in college and then, screwing around with the Raspberry Pi, 2 years ago now. And so I understand the general principles behind what's going on, but if you had asked me to do any of these things, it would have been a disaster. So anyways, he repairs this connection, including removing some solder, applying new solder, fixing some lines, on the PCB. It's very intricate and very interesting. And in the span of 15 minutes, this guy gets this motherboard good as new. Meanwhile, my LG 5K arrived at LG's repair center in City of Industry, California on the 22nd of December, and I have heard precisely about it since then. And I am getting more and more perturbed by it. So there's that. So that's my LG update for the day.
LG always has the best service, Casey. This is totally an anomaly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely an anomaly, for sure.
This video shows the kind of repair that Apple does not allow or like to do, which means changing components on the circuit board by resoldering them or doing whatever. Apple's solution is always new circuit board, fresh new circuit board, everything new, because this type of repair, inevitably things will corrode later and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. If you've ever, I'm looking at this video, if you've ever seen, what's his name, Louis Rossmann, the guy who was talking about in the right to repair thing, he has a similar channel where he shows similar repairs, only he's got the amount that this is zoomed in. I think his is zoomed in maybe 2 to 3 times as much for even tinier components.
Oh, goodness.
And he's got these little tiny soldering iron needle-y things that look huge in the video, but in reality are these tiny, because the smaller the components get, the harder this becomes. So this looks like within the realm that a human might be able to accomplish it, but sometimes when Rossmann does things, I'm like, how far are you zoomed in? It's like doing microsurgery where the tiny tip of the hypodermic needle fills the entire screen as if it's just like a tree trunk.
So anyway, it was interesting and also depressing to see this. So thank you to Brian. So breaking yesterday, I believe it was, Microsoft has decided to acquire Activision Blizzard for almost $70 billion. So you might have heard of Activision for a variety of reasons, mostly their games, but lately you might have heard about them because of the apparent frat house that is their corporate culture. And so Microsoft got them at a steal. They were worth over $100 billion, I think, a year ago. And now they have acquired Activision Blizzard, or are about to acquire Activision Blizzard. And it seems like they're saying without saying they're going to clean house of, at the very least, the CEO, I think it's Bobby Kotick or something like that, and potentially more of senior management at Activision, which seems like a reasonable course of action.
As the numbers here are really big. Someone, John Ehrlichman, tweeted a list of Microsoft's biggest acquisitions. Number 1 is this one, the Activision Blizzard for 70-ish billion. Second place is LinkedIn. I mean, this is like a list of companies you forgot Microsoft bought. Second is LinkedIn. They bought them. That was 26 billion, so less than half the size. Nuance, the speech recognition company, They used to do like Dragon Dictate, I think, but they licensed their speech engine to tons of people. That was 20 billion. Skype was 8 billion. ZeniMax, which no one has ever heard of, but I think we talked about on the show, was 7 billion. That ZeniMax bought id Software, Doom, Quake, all that things, and they owned a bunch of other stuff as well. Microsoft bought GitHub. I'm not sure if people remember that, but they did. That was also 7.5 billion. Nokia, I remember that. Too much. Yeah, 7.2 billion. Aquantive, I don't even know what the hell that is. 6.3 billion. And then Minecraft for 2.5 billion. So Microsoft has purchased a lot of things, but this Activision Blizzard thing is big. If you think about what they're buying, I like reading the articles about it because they're writing an article for general audience that doesn't know who Activision Blizzard is. So they have to say, you don't know the name of this company, kind of like me with a quantitative, but here are the things they own that you might have heard of. So, the Wall Street Journal listed in their article had said that they're getting a stable of popular game franchises, including Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Candy Crush. So there's 3 choices from the very large catalog they're getting. People have probably heard of Call of Duty, maybe World of Warcraft, probably Candy Crush. If you haven't heard the other 2, you probably heard of Candy Crush. But Activision Blizzard, as the weird name implies, is a huge conglomeration of things. Blizzard used to be its own company. Activision used to be a game company, then a game publisher, and Activision bought tons of things, and eventually they bought Blizzard, and they just got bigger and bigger and had more and more IP, and then Microsoft gobbled them all up. And a lot of people were comparing this to like when Disney went and bought all the things. Remember, Disney bought Star Wars, then they bought Marvel, and of course they have all the Disney stuff. And it's like, wow, Disney owns everything. That's why Disney Plus can be a streaming service that has all the things. Like, these are not small franchises. Disney bought Star Wars for, was it $4 billion?
I don't remember.
I think they bought Marvel for also $4 billion. I may be getting the specific numbers wrong, but those are mid-single-digit billions for Star Wars and all of Marvel. And they bought this game company for $70 billion. I mean, you always hear like games are bigger than movies, which is true, but that should give you some idea of how much what they bought was worth. They didn't just buy Star Wars. They didn't just buy Marvel. They bought tons of extremely lucrative franchises and customers they bought, because people have been playing World of Warcraft for what? Is it multiple decades now? At least 1.5 decades or something. Those are subscribers who pay every month to play a game. There's a bunch of other games that are like that. And then all these other important franchises that make tons and tons of money. Not to mention, future games that could be made by the various game development studios that are within Activision Blizzard. So it is a huge purchase. The Wall Street Journal article said that this would make Microsoft the world's 3rd largest gaming company. Don't look at the notes. Try to guess what the number 1 and 2 are without looking if you didn't already read it.
Oh gosh, I did not read it, and I don't have the faintest idea.
I'm going to say number 2 is probably Nintendo.
Is Electronic Arts still a thing?
I believe so.
Number 1, probably EA, and then number 2, Nintendo?
Well, you got to think like Stratechery. Come on.
WeChat?
I mean, you'd probably know the name of the company. Anyway, number 2, Tencent.
Oh,
China's
of course.
Tencent, right.
That makes sense, yeah.
So the other thing you have to remember is that mobile gaming is the biggest part of gaming,
Right.
Which we don't think
true.
about when we think of gaming. And number 1, and this is kind of bogus, number 1, Sony.
Really?
Yeah, but there was the trick question, right? Would make it the 3rd largest gaming company by revenue. Yeah, Sony has a lot of revenue, but not all of that's from video games. I mean, Sony makes other things besides video games. So I think that's a little bit bogus. But that's why everyone is sort of like feeling the ground shake, especially the sort of hardcore gamers who don't maybe care that much about mobile, is because now Microsoft, who, as you might know, has multiple gaming platforms, PC gaming, which basically means Microsoft PC gaming, and not so much Linux gaming, and then of course Xbox. And their competitors are on the console side are Sony and Nintendo. Nintendo is the tiniest drop in the bucket you could possibly imagine. They're not on this list. But now Microsoft owns tons and tons of IP, as they say, tons and tons of franchises, many of which, I would say most of which, used to be available on platforms other than Microsoft's, right? So you could buy many of the games made by Activision Blizzard. You could buy them for PlayStation. And occasionally you could buy them for Nintendo consoles when they felt like throwing some shovelware of last year's game onto a Nintendo platform. Or, they just want to cash in on the Switch craze or whatever. So if you're a gamer and you look at this, you're like, oh no, I don't currently have an Xbox. I have a PlayStation or a Switch or whatever. Will I be able to play the next version of insert my favorite game here now that Microsoft owns it? Because historically, one thing that especially console makers have done is when they buy a franchise or a developer or a publisher or whatever, the next version of that game will only be for their platform. It will be exclusive to their platform. That's the point of buying them. You know, I will buy Rare and the next version of Perfect Dark will not be on Nintendo platforms. It will only be on consoles and it will stink and everyone will be sad. But anyway, and Microsoft does own Rare, by the way. That, you know, it was the old move. It's like, I bought the franchise and now it's only going to be on our platforms. That's another reason for you to buy our thing. So if you're a gamer and you don't have an Xbox platform, it might be kind of sad. But then even if you're not a hardcore gamer, you look at these numbers and you're like, is it really healthy for a company that itself has gaming platforms, you know, PC gaming and the Xbox gaming platform, to also own so many of the most popular game franchises? You know, in the entertainment world, like, Disney owns everything and that's terrible and it makes us sad and it really controls like a lot of what gets made. But Disney doesn't own, you know, 40% of the movie theaters. Not that this is a particularly a great analogy here, but I'm trying. They don't own the means to watch those things, right? They own the IP to make the movies, but you don't have to buy a special Disney console to watch the movies. If they owned both, all the TVs and DVD players, or half the TVs and DVD players in movie theaters, and also all of the, you know, the franchises that constitute the movies, that would be kind of upsetting. So I look at this, and I know there's not anything. Well, I don't think there's anything particularly to stop it from like antitrust or whatever, because in the grand scheme of things, mobile is still bigger, and you can't really slice and dice the market and say, well, it's not a big deal because the gaming market's so big, and we can't say it's just, I only care about the console gaming market. You'd have to really get narrow. It's kind of like, as I say all the time, oh, you know, Honda has a monopoly on Honda cars. Well, they do. But like, you're slicing the market too narrowly. Or Apple has a monopoly on Apple computers. Yeah, but that's stupid. If you look at the entire world of gaming, Microsoft is still small. But if you look at the world of console gaming, they look a little bit bigger. And what I mainly look at is, of Microsoft's competitors, particularly on the console platform, how do their competitors look compared to them in terms of stable of IP that they own? And nobody comes close. Nintendo arguably comes the closest just because they made all their own IP. Like, the stuff that makes Nintendo made. But it's not a lot of it. Like, there's not as many franchises as Microsoft owns. Sony has also bought tons of studios and built up its IP catalog through acquisitions, but it has fallen way behind Microsoft in terms of gobbling up other things in the industry. So I look at this and I get a little bit frightened, but the thing that makes me feel a little bit better is the thing that's usually safe to bet on is when a big company buys a smaller company, they screw it up. When a company buys some IP, they mess it up in some way. Right, that basically the shelf life of IP, especially for video games, is not guaranteed. So you buy Call of Duty, you're like, great, we'll be minting money from Call of Duty for the next 20 years. You won't if you make bad games. To give an example, I don't want to crap on this, but like Bungie made Halo and then split from Microsoft. But Microsoft kept Halo. It's like, great, well, we have the IP. We don't need those stinky Bungie people. We've got the Halo IP. We can continue to make Halo games without them. And they did continue to make Halo games without them. And not that they were bad, and in particular, Halo Infinite is much better than the recent ones, but they never recaptured the magic of the original Bungie-made series of 3 or 4 Halo games, right? IP is like that. You can't just say, well, because we own it, we're going to do a great job of it. It's kind of the inverse of the Marvel effect, right? Marvel IP was owned and optioned by various people at various times for years and years, and nobody can make anything out of it. And they sold it for a song to, you know, a company that said, well, actually, we are going to make good movies with Marvel material. And we're going to start with Iron Man. And they'd be like, who? It's like, just trust me, it'll be good. They took IP that no one could do anything with and made something good out of it. It's equally likely, in fact, probably more likely, to take IP that people have made amazing things with and make some duds. Because it's hard to, like, just owning the IP doesn't mean you can actually do the thing, and particularly in creative fields. Can you make a good game? Can you make a good movie? if you own the characters, fine, that's a start and you get people in seats. But over the course of many, many years, if you don't make good games based on these franchises, people will leave you behind. So, that's why it's important. They didn't just buy the IP. They also bought the studios that made them and the people that made them and so on and so forth. But even within that, I feel like in the games world, there are very few, with the exception, again, possibly of Nintendo stuff, very few sort of franchises that have stood the test of time and not sort of withered and been replaced by other franchises. And Nintendo has done it by basically, it's Mario and all the games, but like, what does, Mario Galaxy have in common with the original Super Mario Brothers in terms of game design and gameplay? Very, very, very little. You think, he's a guy, he's a plumber, he jumps around. But it's Nintendo has had to reinvent its franchises over and over and over again to remain relevant, and that is extremely difficult to do. So, can Call of Duty make the leap to VR in 2075? I don't know. I mean, I feel like it'll just be defunct and be replaced by other franchises. So I'm kind of rooting for this ploy not to work as well as it has for maybe arguably Disney, and for Microsoft to not become the overwhelmingly dominant force in console gaming, because I'm a console gamer and I don't want Microsoft to have that much power.
I know this is interesting. I don't know. I'm actually, because I'm not much of a gamer, almost most interested to see if the cultural changes that Microsoft is hinting are coming actually do arrive, and if they actually do make a difference. It's also interesting for me because my little brother actually used to work there until this past summer, I believe. And so it's kind of fascinating watching from the outside. And I spoke with him very briefly earlier today, and I don't think he had really had time to talk to his former coworkers at that point, but it's interesting to watch, to say the least.
Some people look at the story and think this shows the consequences for screwing up your company by having a terrible culture that is abusive and disrespectful to your employees and sexist and filled with harassment and all that other stuff. It's like, see, it tanked the value of their company, and then someone swooped in and bought them out, right? And everyone seems pretty sure that despite like the announcements today or whatever, that once the acquisition goes through, I mean, this would be true even if there wasn't a terrible culture at Activision. In general, when a company buys you because your stock price was slammed and you're doing really poorly and someone swoops in and buys you, they're not going to keep the people who are running their company around. They're going to replace them all with their people because you suck. That's why we bought you. That's why, so that was going to happen no matter what. But then on top of that, it's like, also, these are all terrible people. And the reason their stock price tanked was because these are all terrible people and we found out about it. I'm pretty sure they're going to clean house for multiple reasons here and hopefully get rid of most of the bad people. It's difficult to do that, though, but everything I've heard, Microsoft's culture is way, way better than Activision. I mean, it's low bar, right? Yeah, Activision's culture is terrible. Microsoft's culture is better, so I have some faith that they're going to, like I said, they're going to clean house for reasons nothing to do with culture, just because that's what you do when you gobble someone up and you put your own people in charge. But hopefully they will find and root out all of the very worst people, in addition to putting all of their good people in charge of things. And that should hopefully help, because I feel like if they can make great games under these terrible conditions, they can make even better games under conditions that are less terrible.
We are sponsored this week by Mack Weldon. Look, it's no secret, we all want to look our best this winter, right? Mack Weldon is the expert when it comes to essential clothing that's perfect for the cold. Whether you need a legitimately warm shirt or you're looking to upgrade your sweats collection, Mack Weldon has exactly what you are looking for. And let me tell you about Mack Weldon's daily wear system. All the clothes work together. So whether you're headed to work, going for a run, or just hanging out on the couch, getting dressed takes no effort at all. I love Mack Weldon's clothing. I've been wearing them every single day for many years now. I think about 4 or 5 years at least. I wear their underwear every single day. It's the silver line. I absolutely love it. I wear their shirts most days, whether it's the wonderful silver t-shirts. That's my favorite line they have. They also have great long sleeve options, really nice undershirts that actually tuck in and stay tucked into your pants, so that or your shorts in the summertime, so you can wear a nice button down over them, and they're just the right weight, so you don't get all sweaty. They're just so great. And here in the cold, I love their warm knit collection. So the warm knit, it's like this fine waffle knit, and it's super great. It's like a wonderful balance of being warm but not making you all sweaty. Mack Weldon uses basically your body temperature to keep you warm without all of the heavy, weight of like something that's super hot. It is just wonderful. I strongly suggest the warm knit collection. I love especially the long sleeve warm knit shirts. They are my favorite in the winter. They're wonderful. So check out Mack Weldon for yourself, and you can save 20% on your first order by visiting mackweldon.com/ATP and using promo code ATP. Once again, that's mackweldon.com/ATP and promo code ATP for 20% off your first order. Find your perfect look for this winter at Mack Weldon. Thank you so much to Mack Weldon for sponsoring our show.
All right, so moving right along. Hey, what's up with those green bubbles?
I don't know. Do any of your conversations with the green bubbles work anymore? I mean, that was one of your longstanding complaints.
It's funny you say that because it just kind of got fixed magically months and months and months ago. And then just like in the last month, either Aaron or I forget which one, lost just a message or two. And I almost was in such a big rage that I flipped my entire home upside down. And the only reason I didn't was because I was saving that moment for the LG 5K, which is still broken. But nevertheless, no, if you recall, basically all of Aaron's family, some of whom are still speaking to us at this point, are on Android phones, and it's been frustrating to say the least. And I have been petitioning very strongly for them to buy iPhones, in part because I am so annoyed by MMS group chats, but also because they're constantly complaining. It's, the standard thing, right? Where the people with the PCs and the Android phones need all the tech support. And I have told all of them in no uncertain terms, if you want to get help on that, that's not me, because I don't run PCs. I don't have Android phones. You're going to have to ask somebody else. And that's mostly worked okay. But anyway, I digress. So if you live in the blessed life where you don't have to interact with Android people, this isn't really a thing. But for those of us who lived the cursed life of a mixed OS world, it is annoying, the green bubbles. But apparently, if you believe the Wall Street Journal, the green bubbles are an evil lock-in that Apple is sitting there, Mr. Burns style, tenting their fingers and cackling all the way to the bank.
Well, I mean, there's the cultural aspect of like, oh, green bubble means you have a less expensive phone, you're poor, like whatever, like the whole sort of class system of fancy iPhones versus non-fancy green bubbles things, which you can imagine teens certainly going in for because that's what being a teenager is all about, whether it's your Reebok shoes or your T-shirt with the alligator on it. I'm using bad references from the 80s. But anyways.
we sound like Mr. Burns trying to describe like what the young people are doing these days.
Well, this the things that I did is
we're so far from this.
I'm describing it as we would have described it in the 80s, making fun of older people who didn't know what an iZod shirt was. Anyway, right. That is definitely a thing, but that does affect the numbers you see of like how many teenagers have an iPhone and how many teenagers want an iPhone. But it's like, well, how many teenagers want the expensive fancy thing? Like, it's good that Apple has that image because you want to be cool with the teens because they eventually become adults and spend money on things. But that's not really the issue. The issue here is what Casey was talking about, even though he was kind of jokingly talking about the class stuff as well, is that if you're trying to have a conversation, like a group conversation using your phone, bugs make that difficult, where someone will reply and you won't see their reply, or half the people will see their reply, or you'll say something, they won't see what you said. Like the basic function of having a group conversation is impaired by poor interoperability between iMessage, which is Apple's service for messaging, and SMS, which is the old cell phone messaging service back from before smartphones even, right? And that bad interoperability is what makes the experience bad. And it leads people to do things like, oh, everything would work better if everyone used the same messaging service. And if it's a majority of people have iPhones and there's one or two people who don't have iPhones, the solution is to badger those people. Say, just get an iPhone so we can have a productive conversation where everybody sees everybody's other messages and we don't miss things and things don't get screwed up, right? And that is a real phenomenon. And this is, started a broader conversation about RCS, which is, I put a link to it in here somewhere. What is it? Rich Communication Service. It's like the successor to SMS, as in a cell phone messaging service that has more feature rich than SMS, that is more modern, that is not doesn't have its origins in like sideband analog cell radio stuff that SMS came from, right? But importantly, it's still like a cell phone type thing where your phone number is your identity and all that other stuff. and lots of other companies have been getting on Apple saying, hey, Apple, you should support RCS, because if you don't, you're showing that you're using iMessage for lock-in for your messaging service or whatever. And there's some truth to that, that like it would be good. Well, start with Casey's thing. It would be good if SMS and iMessage worked better together, as in you could have productive conversations and not miss your messages. Like, I don't see who would disagree with that. I don't think Apple is intentionally sabotaging. I think it's probably a hard problem. But if you pretend to support it, like Casey can, in theory, have a group conversation with Android phones and iPhones, it should work, right? Like, it just should. Otherwise, why have the feature? You know, is it supposed to work, or is it just not supposed to work and it's like a decoy or something, right? And then RCS is similar. If RCS ever becomes a thing and it becomes a feature that carriers, and again, I'm mostly just talking about the US here. We'll get to all your other messaging things in a second. And most carriers support RCS. Apple should probably support it so that you can have a conversation, maybe even a group conversation with multiple people, some of whom are using RCS and some of whom are using iMessage, just like you can have one today with people who are using iMessage and people using SMS. Seems like a reasonable thing to do. And by the way, it should work like all the time, and people should get all the messages. I don't think that's particularly controversial, but I think what most people are mad about is the idea of like message platform lock-in, which is funny to me because iMessage has one of the weakest message platform lock-ins, and like who is it? I think Marco said he heard this on what, Instatechery, or was it the Othering podcast?
Probably Instatechery, yeah.
Talking about this, and I think a lot of people have, in talking about the larger conversation, have hit on what the real issue here, which is what messaging service is popular where you live and why. In the US, iMessage is very popular. If you see someone on a cell phone sending text messages, the chances that especially if they're using an iPhone, the chance that it's iMessages are pretty darn high. Elsewhere in the world, different services have won. I don't remember the exact affiliations, but I'll try. I think Japan is Line is the most popular service. WeChat is China, right? A lot of Europe is WhatsApp. I'm sure there are different ones in other countries. Like, and it's like, how did that come to be? What is it about these services that make them, so dominant in these different places? And why is it different? Why isn't iChat popular across the whole world? Why isn't WhatsApp popular across the whole world? Why are these regionalities, right? I think what it highlights is how little the messaging service itself has to do with what everybody uses. It's just basically like, who got critical mass first? And a lot of things in the computing world are like that. Like, why is Facebook popular? Why was MySpace popular? Why was AOL popular? There's lots of legit reasons, like, hey, well, send out free CDs and here's this business study showing it's great or whatever. But the whole point is, if you're in the right place in the right time and make reasonable enough moves, you can get critical mass for things like this that have network effects, where Facebook is only useful if your friends are also on Facebook. A messaging app like AIM is only useful if your friends are also on AIM. And if you can get that critical mass of everyone I know is on this thing, it snowballs and it becomes very difficult to go someplace else because you need a huge meteor or boulder or explosion or something to kick people off of one and put them onto another, right? It's very hard to dislodge people from if everybody is there. So why is Line in Japan? Because they got critical mass first. Why is WhatsApp in these European countries? Because they got critical mass first. And there are other things like SMS used to cost money there and less money here and so on and so forth. The whole point is whatever got critical mass, that inertia is very difficult to overcome. And you need something big to knock it out. But what it also means is there's nothing specifically about Line versus WhatsApp that makes one better than the other in terms of a messaging service. Maybe there's better cultural fits in terms of how they marketed themselves. And of course, there are economic ones of what was free versus what charged money and how much did carriers charge for things and so on and so forth, but not the specific service, right? And related to that, just before we came on the air, I read a Jason Snell article in Mack Weldon that talks about one point that I was going to make in the show was that iMessage is crappy. We all know this, right? It's not a good messaging service. We already pointed out how it doesn't interoperate with SMS. It has very few features compared to other services. Even just within iMessage, there can be weird bugs and stuff. And it doesn't change much. Every year, iMessage doesn't get that much better. I mean, they tried to do the iMessage App Store, and that didn't really go anywhere. But lots of things that are in iMessage have been the same as they have been for ages. The search is still bad. The way they do replies is still weird. Jason pointed out that, like, the tap back feature where you can put different reactions. It's been the same like 5 or 6 reactions for the entire life of that feature. It's not a product that they're iterating on and making better and better all the time. So if you could say, okay, everybody's kicked off all their messaging services, none of your friends are on any messaging service. Let's start from a level playing field, and let's all decide what messaging service we should get on. And by the way, we erased your memory so you don't remember iMessage, so you can't do it out of habit. And you looked at the messaging services based on who has the nicest app, who has the most features, like all that other stuff. And price is mostly taken out of it because these are all these days internet-powered things. I don't think iMessage would do as well as it does. It was a default messaging app on iPhones, and iPhone became popular, and that's why iMessage is popular. But not because it's a good message service. It's terrible, right? And so this whole conversation about like, oh, iMessage is giving you lock-in or whatever, everything with network effects gives you lock-in, and it always feels terrible. It's like, why is everybody doing X when Y is better than X? It's like, well, it's too late. Everybody's doing X, and it's a social thing. And so unless you have some way to get everybody off of X and onto Y, like say X goes out of business, or X is overwhelmed with spam, or it's very difficult. I'm trying to think of like, it's like conversation I had with Merlin, what would get people off Facebook? What would get people off of their messaging service of choice? If everyone you know is on WhatsApp, what gets you off of WhatsApp? What gets you and everyone you know off of WhatsApp? And it's very difficult. We haven't been able to get everybody off of Facebook, and I don't think you're going to get everybody who's on iMessage off of iMessage. So that's why I feel it's imperative that if you're going to do cross-protocol support, that you make it actually work. And if you're not going to do cross-protocol support, then just don't do it at all and let your message, make your own little bubbles in the world. So all this to say is that I guess Apple should probably implement RCS, but it's not going to really help anything. Oh, and by the way, RCS is, because it's a carrier thing, it's kind of swimming against the tide where modern messaging services say, we'll use the internet to communicate, which is a great idea because the internet is cool. But having your identity be your phone number, that's really crappy. Apple, speaking of half-hearted things Apple did, can I send SMSs from my Mac? Yeah, kind of, through your phone because you need a phone number. Well, can I have a conversation with blue and green bubbles on my Mac? Sort of, with a little help from your phone or a relay that converts it's like if you use the internet, anything connected to the internet can do it. If you use your phone number, there has to be a cell phone or a phone number somewhere involved. And in that respect, RCS is sort of a retrograde type of service where it's not forward-looking. Like forward-looking services are all internet-based. And so although we'll probably have to support RCS because it's better than SMS and it's not as technically backwards, if you're looking for a new service for the entire world to communicate with each other on, RCS is not it. It's got to be something on the internet.
I don't know. I don't see Apple being willing to implement RCS unless they can explain away the lack of end-to-end encryption. Because my limited understanding of RCS, I might have this wrong, is I think Google layered on like a superset or something of RCS or their own like custom, like Apple does with Bluetooth and has their own custom stuff riding on top of like traditional Bluetooth. Well, I guess Google, I think, had put their own custom stuff on top of RCS so they could get end-to-end encrypted messages. And I don't see Apple being able to, or perhaps willing to implement RCS unless they have a good privacy story, because otherwise it's like, well, why are you banging this privacy drum over there, but then you totally throw it out the window over here? And with SMS and MMS, I mean, it's like table stakes, at least here in America, that you have to support those things. Otherwise, you basically don't have a functioning cellular phone. But I know it's different the rest of the world. But for here, you have to have it. But to add something that is, I was going to say inherently dangerous, but that's a bit overblown. That is certainly less secure than Apple would like. It seems like it would be disingenuous for them to do that.
Well, SMS already doesn't have any security, so this would be just a replacement for SMS. Like, I don't think Apple is raring to go on this. I think if other people implement RCS and it becomes an issue where it's like, hey, everyone else is doing it at Apple, then Apple should do it too. But I don't think Apple has to lead here or anything. Like, you mentioned SMS, and like the reason you have to have it to have a functioning cell phone is, just to give one example, is the current use of SMS for two-factor, which itself has its own problems, but it is still a common practice. And the whole point of that being a second factor is that it's a phone number, right? And it was sent through SMS because that is sort of the base level, lowest common denominator thing that cell phones can understand. Could people send two-factor through using RCS? They could, but you have to get to a point where there is a reasonable chance that that's going to work. I don't think there are probably any cell phones that people are still using that can't do SMS, but RCS is nowhere, right? So
I don't think that's true. I think it's implemented in lots of places, isn't it? Maybe I have this all wrong, but I could swear that it's been implemented certainly on a lot of carriers. And I thought like Android has had it for many more years than I had thought. I thought it was just coming out now, and I think it's been there for like 4 or 5 years.
The standard is certainly very old, but I think everybody still sends two-factor stuff using plain old SMS and not RCS, just because it's guaranteed to be there. At the minimum, the billions of iPhones in the world can't get it. And so if you send it via RCS, and someone has an iPhone, they can't log into your two-factor thing. That seems like a big deal. Like, that's why they're going to, So anyway, if RCS replaces it just because SMS is an ancient old standard and eventually SMS is going to go away and RCS is going to replace it, then yeah, Apple has to do it because it's the lowest common denominator. Same reason Apple, well, not the same reason Apple will do SMS because iMessage know it exists, but like the same reason Apple continues to support SMS. Not because Apple loves SMS, it's because if they took it away, their phone becomes significantly less functional for their users. If RCS ever gets to that point, then Apple will have to do it. And I feel like that's what I'm saying. Apple should do it probably before it becomes a problem, but only just before it becomes a problem for them. I'm not sure it's a problem right now. I've certainly never encountered something in my life where my phone's lack of RCS support has been a problem, but they should eventually implement it don't wait for it to be a problem and then band-aid it, anticipate it by a little bit and then implement it. And who knows? I hold out hope that RCS being a more modern protocol, Apple and implementing it in a more modern time, maybe with a more modern language even, there is a higher chance that the interoperability between iMessage and RCS will work better than the interoperability between SMS and iMessage. And hey, that's great for Apple. They just never have to fix those bugs. They can just let it sail off into the sunset and replace it with the new, better, actually functional RCS and iMessage interoperability.
If I may, again, take us on a small tangent, something that really drives me nuts about my group chats with, one or more Android people is, and I'm sure many Americans have experienced this, if I'm in a group chat, like, for example, Aaron and me and my brother-in-law, who's an Android user, and my sister-in-law, who also has an iPhone, because of my brother-in-law, whom I love dearly, the entire damn chat is all green bubbles because that one Android phone. It makes sense. And if I were to slip up, or let's say if Aaron were to slip up and do a tap back on one of these messages, which I would argue maybe shouldn't even be allowed in the first place, but let's leave that aside for a second. What I will receive is Aaron Liss liked, and then like a quotation of the message that she gave a thumbs up to, which, okay, fine. I understand that, when Aaron's phone is trying to verbalize, for lack of a better word, or transmit her action to an Android phone, the best it can do is say, Aaron Liss liked, and then repeat the message. Sure, totally makes sense. But on my phone, I have an iPhone. Why is Apple not parsing Aaron Liss liked and then the exact message that she liked? Why is Messages not parsing this and throwing a thumbs up on the message that she liked? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't want it to be parsing. What you want is sort of a dual rights thing where your phone sends the iMessage to the iMessage people and the SMS to the SMS people. So you're doing everything sort of like the native way. You wouldn't want it to be...
I'm sure there would be no problems there, John, with no one source of truth.
But what I'm saying is like the other way you're describing is, if an SMS comes in and the string is exactly one of these 5 strings, interpret it as a tap back on the previous thing. And that is not a great way to go about things. Because especially with localization and other stuff, like it's weird. You don't want to sort of like send text, interpret text that goes through SMS, certain text being special triggering commands to run. It's probably not how you want to go. Even if it's as simple as like, well, when I see that, I'll interpret it as a thumb and display it that way. Not that SMS and iMessage aren't cracked 10 different ways all the time anyway, but I probably wouldn't choose to do that. But the way they do it, you can see it making sense. It's like, and look, how will we interoperate? Oh, it's easy. We'll just convert everything to text. And they just didn't go the extra mile to say, but, can we make it better for the iMessage users? And that gets into the conspiracy theories. Like, see, they made it look annoying, so the green bubble people would be shunned into getting an iPhone. But
so that's the thing, right? Is that I totally understand that Erin's phone, when she likes the message, sounds good. I totally understand that her phone emits Aaron Liss liked, sounds good. But where I start to be the conspiracy theorist with like the red yarn all over the bulletin board is when my phone doesn't take that and turn it into a thumbs up. And I understand what you guys are saying, but I feel like there's got to be a way to make this somewhat reliable. Or you know what? Even if somebody literally typed the message, Casey List likes such and such, and like if there was an errant thumb, like is that really the end of the earth?
If there was an errant thumb attributed to you, because the client would then interpret it as you liking the thing, you need a little.
Well, sure, but perhaps it would only do that if if I typed out Casey List liked sounds good.
I know. I mean, anyway, so there's two angles. One, the product design one is doing it as text for everybody is a uniform experience, sort of adhering to a principle that you may have for the UI that everyone involved in group conversations sees the same thing. Right. And so you may not like that. And it's like, well, why do we have to get dumbed down? And it gets back to that whole argument. But at least it's a consistent experience. In theory, I mean, minus the bugs that we're talking about, the whole point is we don't get a consistent experience. But you can see the argument for the sort of simplicity of just saying, look, everybody in the group chat sees the same thing. We're not giving special treatment to the Apple ones where they know how to do the tapbacks and the other ones don't, just so we're all looking at the same stuff.
Yeah, but I could swear that I read recently, and I'm not going to be able to dig up an article to justify or verify this, but I swear that Google is doing what I described.
I'm saying like it could. I'm saying from a product design perspective, you could make the decision that everyone should see the same thing, even if only just so you know what they're seeing, right? So because otherwise, how do you know what other people are seeing on their screen? If it looks good to you, maybe you don't realize that it looks weird to them, whereas just doing this text everywhere shows it looks good to everybody. So there is an argument to be made for this sort of consistency, even though it's lesser quality. But the other thing is, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's just like if Apple's going to prioritize features, they're not going to prioritize making really, really good integration with SMS just because they would prefer everyone to use iMessage. So why are we, it's not like they're mustache twisting. It's part of our dastardly plan. It's just plain old prioritization. It's like, what do we care more about? Like new feature X or making SMS and iMessage work together better? And clearly they don't care that much about making SMS, iMessage work together. Even just basic functionality in terms of the messages go through and people see them. Like that has been a struggle. This is way down on the list. Like it's just prioritization, sort of banality of it's not even banality of evil. It's not actually evil. It's just like, look, we have to have priorities. And this is a pretty low one because Apple's solution would be just use iMessage. It comes with your phone. Oh, but my friends don't have iMessage. Oh, they should buy iPhones. But if they don't, we try to interoperate too. And we do the best we can, but like, it's not going to be a high priority. Like Apple is not going to, win people over by making that integration better. And that sounds evil to people. It's like, see, they're intentionally making it bad. But I feel like there is a nuanced distinction between choosing your priorities based on what's important to the company versus an evil plan to punish bad people with green bubbles. Right? And even though they seem like they're the same thing, I feel like it's important to understand the distinction there, right? Even if there are like 2 or 3 people who are twisting their mustaches or rubbing their hands together saying, this will really teach those Android users. I don't think it's like corporate policy to do that. If you look at the leaked emails and everything, I think it was Eddie Q was pushing for iMessage to be on all platforms, and other people said, why would we do that? It's great platform lock-in. People use iPhones because they all have iMessage, and if we let iMessage be everywhere, that removes a differentiator. And people think that's evil. That's what everybody does in business. It's like, why would we put Halo on the PlayStation? People buy an Xbox because it has Halo. Why would we put it everywhere? It's like, see, you're trying to lock people into the Xbox. Like, yeah. We're trying to make the Xbox be the best-selling cup. Like, that's business, and it's not a life or death thing, and it's not like, I don't think that's particularly evil. And even then, the argument was had with some big executives like Eddie Q arguing, it's like, that's all well and good, but we should make iMessage be everywhere, right? Because it would make us more successful, like bringing the iPod to Windows, right? That's always the push and pull, especially in computer markets or whatever. It was like, should we try to be the standard for everything, or should we try to be a really cool feature that makes you buy our product instead of theirs? And it's not always easy to know when you should cross over that bridge. Like in hindsight, it's easy. Like, can you believe they didn't want to put the iPod on Windows? How dumb would have that been? Yeah, it's easy in hindsight, but other decisions have gone the other way and have also worked out. So, I'm not sure where iMessage is at this point. As I think they were saying on Dithering, it may be too late to put iMessage everywhere. Speaking of that, it's like, Apple can solve this problem by just putting iMessage on every single platform. Who the hell would want iMessage? If you're using something that has better features, which is basically anything that's not iMessage, like Line, WhatsApp, probably WeChat, all those things are better chat clients than iMessage. They have more features. They're more useful. They're, and maybe some of them are also crappy in ways that Apple wouldn't like in terms of being festooned with ads or spam or whatever. But in terms of feature set, it's not even close. What I think about is Slack. Slack is so much better at sending textual messages back and forth to people and having conversations and threads and reactions and inline previews and all the things you do. And that's a freaking web view. And it's so much better than iMessage. It's not even funny. I would use Slack as my instant messaging app if that was an option. But of course, to do that, I would have to, send the giant asteroid that would knock everybody I know off of iMessage and onto some hypothetical iMessage replacement that has the same features as Slack, right? And I guess the other factor that we need to throw in here is who owns the thing? A private company owning something like Facebook owning WhatsApp may be a factor in some people's decisions, and it certainly is in mine. Not enough to, change who goes where, because network effects, don't care about that. But I would prefer not to switch from iMessage to a system owned by a company that I trust less than Apple. That doesn't mean that's what's keeping people on iMessage at all. But me personally, I don't like the idea of switching to a better, more full-featured chat client that happens to be owned by Facebook. So I really hope that doesn't happen.
I almost wonder, how much any of this, giving people new options at this point, I wonder how much that even matters, because it seems like most people don't evaluate, like you were saying, John, how it would be pretty much impossible to try to move everyone off of what they're using now. And I think the reason why is that most people, I think, have worked out their messaging platform around the time that they got their first smartphone. And all their friends got smartphones, and they all messaged each other on something. And I think most of the world that can have a phone at all now has a smartphone and has a messaging platform. And I think it's one of those things as you were saying, 3 hours ago, it's not that these platforms are competing on features or anything. They're mostly just why do people use the ones they use? Well, because their friends used it, and that's how they talk to their friends. And then it's just kind of, certain groups fall into place with certain platforms. And I don't think we're ever going to change that. I don't think, first of all, I'm surprised RCS is even still being talked about because it had so many shortcomings when it was first floated, however many years ago that was. But no one's looking for text messaging to get better without it being a totally different thing. No one's looking for RCS. That solves no problems people actually have. And iMessage is great for the people who use it. The people who currently don't use iMessage will probably never use iMessage. And I think you could say that about almost all these platforms. Whatever you use, your messaging needs, if you have a smartphone, your messaging needs are probably pretty well settled. And you're probably not looking to change. And so I almost wonder how much any of this, discussion even, if Apple launched iMessage on Android tomorrow, would people actually even install it? Would people use it? Probably not. People probably keep doing what they're doing already.
Well, it has a chance in the U.S. just because so many people in the U.S. still use SMS. Right. And SMS is so dire and so terrible and so old that I think you could get some people, if they put out iMessage for Android, I think you could get a lot of Android people off of SMS and onto iMessage. Because in this country, we don't have, a huge majority of people on WhatsApp or WeChat or Line or anything like that. The other thing, there's two other things that can move people. Obviously the big asteroid coming, one version of the big asteroid is, hey, the company that runs Line, they went out of business. Guess what? That'll get everybody offline. That's the problem with these. I'm on a messaging platform. I'm never going to move. You'll move if the company goes out of business and doesn't get bought. Or you'll move if that company turns into a blockchain thing and starts spamming you with NFT crap and just becomes a giant scam thing, right? Or it becomes festooned with ads, or someone buys it and drives it into the ground. That's the difficulty of having network effect based platforms owned by individual companies, because individual companies can screw up and they can go out of business or be bought by somebody worse and do terrible things and just mess up. Arguably, that's kind of what happened to MySpace versus Facebook, right? We keep hoping that Facebook's going to screw up and wither away and die, but they keep staying alive and getting more money, so it's difficult to kill them. But that's one way you can get rid of things. And the second way is people, like I said, they're just never going to change their platforms. Yeah, but they die. And if young people are using a different platform,
wow,
right? If young people are using a different platform, young people all message each other on Snapchat, and Snapchat becomes the dominant platform of the next 50 years because those young people started using Snapchat when they were 9 and just never stopped, right? Because that's what them and all their friends were on. That type of thing, but that's not an asteroid. That's more of a slow rollover. That can also happen. We're just a generational thing. One thing is seen as cooler than something else. Old people use X, young people use Y, and the old people never change and the young people never change. And you wake up 50 years later and all the old people are dead and everybody's using Snapchat for messaging.
Oh my gosh.
But that presupposes that Snapchat's going to stay in business and not screw up their their application and everything, right? This is the danger of having something as important as ubiquitous, instant message type text messaging being owned by individual private companies. If there was an individual private company that owned email, we would be on email 7 by now, like whatever the 7th iteration of email is. Not that email is great, no encryption, spam is a problem, blah, 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 blah. Because it wasn't owned by any single company, it's very difficult to kill. Companies come and go. Companies screw up. They fill their products with ads and spam and malware and do all sorts of terrible things. But email survives because no matter what any individual company does, email as a standard has network effect, is one of the original network effects of the internet, right? Everybody's got it. It's difficult for any single company to replace it, although lots of people tried really, really hard and they didn't pull it off. And no matter how many companies go out of business, email stays. That's not true of instant messaging. So we're kind of in the early stages of that. In 50 years, of all the companies I described, how many will still be in business? How many would have been bought by other companies? If like WhatsApp, Facebook buys Line and says Line is eventually gone and now it's folded into WhatsApp. And by the way, WhatsApp is gone and it's folded into Facebook Messenger. Like those are things that can happen. It's the danger of having private companies that may not live that long and may not do what you want, controlling such an important thing. So that's the one thing that RCS has going for it, is that at least it's like a cross-company standard. I mean, granted, they're cell phone carriers, so not the best companies, and granted, it's a terrible standard, and it's crappy and old and doesn't have the features we want, and so on and so forth. But that's one of the advantages that SMS has, is there's no company that can go out of business that makes SMS not work, right? It's kind of baked in. It's old, it's ancient, it's crappy, but it's not owned by any one single company. RCS has that advantage. And the advantage for me personally, not for regular people because they don't care, but for me personally, I like the fact that Apple runs iMessage because I trust Apple more than, say, Facebook or whoever owns WeChat. Any company based in China, I probably don't want them to run the messaging service that the whole world uses, right? So I think this is still a problem area, and it is difficult to move people en masse from one thing to the other, but change can happen through people dying, and change can happen through companies dying. And I guess that's what we have to root for. Not people dying. That's going to happen whether we root for it or not, I guess.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
When they're really old, long, a natural death, as we call it. Not an unnatural death, but a natural one.
Oh, dear God.
When you're old and no one cares about you anymore.
Usually I'm the one who puts not only my foot, but my ankle and my thigh in my mouth. But today, that role is being played by John Syracuse.
Have you ever thought about the phrase that died of natural causes?
It's like a natural childbirth. It's the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing at all.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, whatever. I don't feel like arguing about that either. See, this is where I put my foot in my mouth. It's happening again. Anyway, I don't know. And the other thing, just to get ahead of the feedback emails that have already come in, I'm quite sure, every time we talk about messaging platforms, particularly Americans, all the like smug Europeans and people from, like the Asian countries are always like, well, just tell everyone to change.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sure. I'm going to tell the 700 contacts in my phone book, you know what? The king has decided that I am going to use WeChat now. So if you would like to talk to me, come talk to me on WeChat. Yeah, that's totally going to work. Related, when's the last time you loaded the Glass app on your iPhone? I rest my case.
Does anyone actually say that? Just tell everyone to change? I haven't seen that.
Yes, it happened in the chat earlier today.
Earlier today. To get it, but yeah. It's kind of like people saying we can solve traffic jams by everyone just to go at once, right?
Seriously. It's so preposterous. Like, yes, maybe like my core 20 or 30 people, maybe I could get half of them to change to my preferred messaging service, but the likelihood of that is
even if you bought them all brand new iPhones, you probably still couldn't get 100% conversion.
Right,
If you bought them and paid for their cell phone plan for their life, you probably still couldn't get 100% conversion.
Yep.
Because people just like what they're used to, right? And they don't want change. Like, why am I changing? Why don't you change for me? Why don't you get an Android phone? How about that?
We are sponsored this week by Linode, my favorite place to run servers. Visit linode.com/ATP and see why Linode has been voted the top infrastructure as a service provider by both G2 and TrustRadius. From their award-winning support, 24/7, 365 for every level of user. To their ease of use and ease of setup, it's clear why developers like me have been trusting Linode for our projects both big and small since 2003. I've personally been a Linode customer since, I think, 2010 or something. A long time, the better part of a decade at least, and I've just loved it the entire time. When I looked for web hosts, I would always, look at things from the bottom up in terms of price. Start with the cheapest host out there, and if it fit my needs, go with it. If not, try the next cheapest one. Linode has been the best value host in the entire business since I've been with them. That's, most of a decade or all of a decade. They've been the best value. They have the best price to performance ratio for all compute instances, including their GPU compute instances, plus their new block storage option, Kubernetes, their upcoming bare metal release, and more. They are a great value, and they've been a great value the entire time I've been with them. And they also are just good above that. Like, at any price, they're just really, really good. They have great, control panel and API stuff, great building blocks to use if you want to. It's just a great web host. I absolutely love Linode. That's why I've been with them for so long, since long before they were a sponsor. Linode makes cloud computing fast, simple, and affordable, so you can focus on your projects, not your infrastructure. You can deploy your entire application stack with their one-click app marketplace, build it all from scratch, manage everything yourself. You can use tools like Terraform, so much more at Linode. So visit linode.com/ATP, create a free account with your Google or GitHub account or email address, and you get $100 in credit. Once again, linode.com/ATP, create a free account to get $100 in credit. Thank you so much to Linode for hosting my servers and sponsoring our show.
All right, let's do some Ask ATP. And I have been excited to hear John talk about this, and that's no sarcasm. I really mean it. Daniel Bergquist writes, macOS is over 2 decades old now, but its foundation is still roughly the same, and also the foundation of Apple's entire OS suite. Would you say that this will continue to be true for the next 2 decades? Or should we assume that a team within Apple is cranking away on exploring a completely new OS approach, designed from the ground up to even better suit Apple's multifaceted future? Should we expect another large transition within the next 20 years because of this, maybe impacting Apple's full range of products? And if so, what is your advice for Apple, as well as your hopes and dreams for this new approach? And to get ahead of you, John, the very first thing I thought of when I read this Ask ATP, which was very good, was avoiding Copeland 2010, which I will put in the show notes.
You should probably put the revisited article because it explains it and has all the links back, because otherwise you have to link to all 3 of them and it's confusing. So maybe just do the revisited article is the main link.
Sorry, Dad.
Yeah, we've done these links before. Anyway. So for making a completely new OS, the rumors are that's one of the things that Apple was doing for the car project, because as you can imagine, an operating system suitable for helping a car to drive has different requirements than one that runs your cell phone or whatever. And, it's a clean sheet type thing. Apple doesn't have an existing car. They don't have an existing car software base, so they could start from scratch and use more modern technology better suited to being a car OS. But who knows where any of that is going. That aside, the good thing about what Apple did with Mac OS X is they sort of built their operating system, the Core OS thing, with a POSIX Unix style layer to it. And that really helps for the future. If there's some deficit of the microkernel, the Mack microkernel, and the BSD system that's fused to it, and all sort of low-level parts of Apple's operating system. If it turns out that there's some limiting factor for some future application, whether it be VR or self-driving cars, something like that, Apple can really replumb the guts in very interesting ways while still maintaining that sort of POSIX compliant layer on top of it. Because that's something that the software industry has done many times over, putting POSIX layers on operating systems that are not themselves like natively Unix POSIX systems. Windows NT did it back in the day. Microsoft does it with Windows. Like it is a common thing. Arguably, Apple's kind of doing it with the BSD kernel fused to Mack and everything. And yes, there are all sorts of stuff in Mac OS X that use the Mack ports and all sorts of Mack IPC features that are specific to Mack, but you can also, I'm saying MACH, you can also mock those, MOCK. You can mock versions of Mack. What I'm saying is that it's a layer cake. And so
oh my gosh,
you have because Apple got rid of the main deficits, which was, hey, no memory protection, no preemptive multitasking, all the Copeland 2010 stuff, right? Because they addressed those, and have a solid foundation, they can rip out the guts and put better, more interesting guts in there while still maintaining lots of compatibility with the higher layers, because that layer, that sort of POSIX Unix layer, is very common across the entire world of operating system that has proved very durable and useful. There's no underlying design that really negates that interface. And it's not to say that could be the only thing. You could have some sort of real-time operating system that you use in the car and it has advanced features, but you can implement the sort of old fuddy-duddy POSIX APIs on top of that and give them a road going forward. That said, so far, everything that Apple has made has shown that the guts of Next Step / macOS 10 is surprisingly flexible. They put it on a watch, right? They didn't just put it in a phone or an iPad. They put it in a wristwatch. So I'm not sure what flexibility or new features you need from the Core OS that you're not getting. They put it on the giant Mac Pro all the way down to a wristwatch, and it's done really well in all of those different applications. It just goes to show that the Core OS is not the limiting factor in those things. So I don't think there's any specific thing that Apple needs for any of the platforms that are currently planned, setting aside the car. So AR, VR, future gaming console, any kind of computing device from a wristwatch all the way up to a big personal computer, I think their Core OS is in a reasonable good place. And it's not like it hasn't changed. It is improved and everything, but I think that's doing mostly okay. They can replumb the kernel to try to fix some long-standing architectural problems, and they can do it in a way that we probably don't notice. The car is the one where they might need a new approach, and rumor is that's what they were doing for the car, which is, let's not build this on top of the macOS 10 foundation because it's kind of old and creaky in terms of the way we need a car OS to handle. Like, the reliability concerns of a multi-thousand-pound piece of metal are different than the reliability concerns of your cell phone. They just are. So let's get something that's more reliable, and we're not going to get to that reliability by starting with this giant code base and trying to make it more reliable. And plus, we need real-time features because you kind of need to decide now whether you should turn. And their operating system's designed for that, right? They're real-time operating system using spacecraft and airplanes and all sorts of other stuff. And Apple being Apple, of course, they would try to make their own, right? Because they're a lot of smart people, which fine. But that project hasn't come out yet. So that is the only place where I think a new OS approach is, if not necessary, then reasonably appropriate. Every other application Apple has applied the Darwin core of macOS 10, macOS whatever, to, it has succeeded and gone great. Again, I will cite the wristwatch. If you can get it to run on a wristwatch and a giant Mac Pro, it's probably doing okay. So I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I'm surprised by this. I was expecting a lot more angst from you. I'm not saying this is bad. I'm surprised.
There were rumors in that same blog where the Couple 2010 thing was like that the L4 microkernel was being investigated, like the really, really core of the OS. Like, there's lots of interesting projects of how you can make something more reliable or faster or better in situations of high contention. But you can do that without disturbing the higher layers. And it turns out they haven't needed to do that yet. So it makes me think that there's not a particular crisis looming here. Maybe I need the younger version of me to write like avoiding Copeland 2057. But right now, I think with the exception of the car project, they're in a reasonably good position.
Patrick writes, I haven't owned or played a gaming system in over 10 years. Recently, I played some Halo with a friend. It was a lot of fun, and I'm thinking about getting a modern system. The problem, however, is that I don't know which one to get. I don't want to buy multiple platforms since I'm not a hardcore gamer. The Switch, PS5, and Xbox all have a game or two that look really appealing. Do you have any advice on helping me choose a platform? Without knowing exactly which games look appealing to Patrick on each platform, I would just say go with the one that's going to give you the most fun. You know, if you're not a hardcore gamer, that means that getting the latest and greatest graphics on like the PS5 and, you know, Xbox, whatever it is, it's a lower priority. What you're optimizing for is fun. And I think for most people, the odds are you'd have the most fun with the Switch out of those. It's also right now much easier to get. So that helps. And it benefits from a pretty large software library since it's been out a few years now, compared to the PS5 and Xbox whatever, which are both much newer. And so I would say unless there's a really must-have game or games calling you over to the PS5 or Xbox, go with the Switch because you're more likely to find a lot of fun there, and it's just easier to approach being
less expensive, easier to get, larger game library already in place, and it has the benefit of being portable if you ever actually need that, which you might not think you would use, but you might end up using it.
I don't think there's a larger game library because you forget the PlayStation plays PlayStation 4 games and the Xbox plays the older Xbox games as well. So there's a big catalog of those. But the not a hardcore gamer is the big twist here, because it makes people think, like what you just said, okay, well then you don't care about all these, why get a super expensive, super powerful console? You don't care. You're not a hardcore gamer. But if you're not a hardcore gamer, that also means the people who say that probably don't have a lot of experience, especially with modern video games. So you don't know if that person is the type of person who is going to love World of Warcraft and should therefore get a gaming PC, right? Because they've never had contact with it. They don't have any immunities built up. They don't have the antibodies. You don't know what thing is going to be their thing. It could be that it turns out that they're super into real-time strategy games, or they get obsessed with puzzle games, or they're really, really into, Final Fantasy. You just don't know because they haven't been exposed to them. So they can't give you an opinion. I like this type of game or that type of game. And so guessing you should like Nintendo because most people like Nintendo and it's fun. It's hard to make that assumption. If I met this person in real life, I'd talk to them and try to figure out, if you've played any games in the past, which one appealed to you? And you're like, well, I used to play SimCity a lot and I would lose hours and hours in SimCity and Civilization, right? That tells me a lot about what type of game they're going to be interested in. But by the same token, if they've never played an open world game, for example, maybe that's the thing that is going to make them obsessed. And it's so difficult to choose a platform without really interrogating somebody about that, because most people who play video games don't play any large percentage of the games available for a platform. Not everybody's like me, where you essentially play one game all the time, but some people don't. But one game, some people, all they play is World of Warcraft, right? For a first approximation, all I play is Destiny. Right? That's one type of gamer. But the other type is not someone who plays 75 games a year. Most people play a small number of games per year of the type that they like. And if you are really, really into, Zelda, you have to get Nintendo. It's the only place it is. There's not even any kind of Zelda equivalents on other platforms for the most part. Sorry, Oceanhorn. And if you just play the one or two Zelda games that are released and then a couple other things, you have to get a Nintendo platform. So that's the danger of picking a platform. You're like, I'm really excited about Call of Duty, and that's available everywhere, right? Well, fast forward and maybe it's only available on Xbox and PC, and they get a PlayStation and they're like, oh, but I want to play Call of Duty. In fact, that's the only thing I want to do with my game system is play Call of Duty. Now I can't play Call of Duty. This thing is useless to me. But when someone's not a hardcore gamer, you don't know. Are they going to be a single franchise player for a decade? Or are they going to get heavily into one or two types of games that are better on one platform than the other? So it's really a shot in the dark. So my suggestion for anyone like this is find a game that you think you really want to play, and maybe test that theory by trying it over a friend's house or whatever, and then buy whatever platform that game is on. Right? If it's on multiple platforms, then it's an easier conversation. You can talk about price and features and availability, blah, 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 but you're not. I know it's difficult because you're like, I don't want to buy the wrong platform, but really what you want to do is find the game or games that appeal to you, and then buy whatever platform lets you play that game or games.
But I would say the odds of the Switch having stuff that you find really fun are pretty high.
But it depends. Maybe they're the type of person who's going to get obsessively into Civilization. The Switch is not going to help them there, right? Or I don't know, Civilization. So I'm trying to think of a game
well, then you're a PC, I think, at that point.
Right. Well, but you don't know. Maybe someone who's just all I do is play The Sims. Right. That's all I do all day long is play The Sims. That's the type of game I get into. Or or World of Warcraft, or, an open world thing. You have to know. You never know, if they haven't had contact with that, what is going to suck them into the rabbit hole. Or maybe they get sucked into no rabbit holes and they just want to casually play stuff and they should just be fine with their phone, right? So that's why it's so difficult for people who haven't been exposed. Because if you haven't been exposed, you don't know what, if anything, will grab you. And you can't predict based on your past behavior, because if you've never been exposed to World of Warcraft, you have no idea whether it will consume your life or whether you will not care about it at all.
Yeah, this is the one moment where I kind of am sad that Blockbuster Video doesn't exist anymore, right? Because weren't you talking about this, Marco, just a couple of months back, like renting video game systems and video games and whatnot, and so you could like rent a Switch and give it a try for a week or whatever, a few nights, just to see how it goes, and then rent an Xbox after that, and so on.
It amazes me that they did that. I mean, I did that. I rented the systems. I was like, how did those systems survive for more than 3 days?
Yeah, seriously.
It was a gentler time, I guess.
I think I was the only person renting the Sega Saturn, so it was getting pretty gently used.
You again. Okay, you want the Saturn? Here you go.
All right. And then Peter Wagner writes, my wife and I recently combined our last names into a single hyphenated last name. However, I know many people confuse hyphens M dashes and N dashes. Is that right? Is it EM or,
Yep.
or am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's M.
You got it right.
It's M and N. Yep.
All right, I didn't know if I was supposed to be like spelling those out or anything. Anyways, do most programming languages distinguish between these three? I worry someone will use the wrong one and will wind up with multiple entries in an important database somewhere. Or worse, they won't be able to find our entry at all.
This is where not being a computer programmer is a blessing for normal people. But also it makes you have sometimes the wrong mental model about what part of what is responsible for what. So this is not, for the most part, a programming language problem, but it is a problem. But it's a problem for complicated, stupid reasons that you probably don't care about, involving the entire stack between you and where the data is stored and back. And I'm sure all of us could describe all the different places where this can get screwed up, including sometimes the programming language, but very rarely. But the wire protocol, the database format, the web form, like there are so many places where non-ASCII characters can get mangled due to sort of, U.S. dominance and invention of the internet and international standards and crap like that. That yes, you probably should be concerned that anything fancier than ASCII is going to get mangled by some, especially if you're in the US, is going to get mangled by some system somewhere. But it is not mostly the fault of the programming language. It's the fault of one of the other 17 layers between you and success.
Anytime that you are relying on other people to enter your information into a computer system, you have a pretty high risk of errors there, no matter whether you have a hyphen or not. So I think that John is right, first of all, that this is not a language problem, but this is a technology problem in the sense that, you're relying on things like Unicode normalization to match, and anybody who has a name that has a letter that is not common in English. So, for instance, if you have a vowel that has an accent over it, various forms as part of your name, or something like that, there's going to be a lot of cases where not necessarily programming languages, but just like the frameworks, the databases, as John was saying, different parts of the stack might either not consider an A with an accent over it to be an A, or they might consider that to be a different character than an A, or it might not match in the right way or something, or it
gets double encoded because someone screwed up the web form, and so now the UTF-8 itself becomes UTF-8 encoded, and you get the big capital A with a tilde over it. And there's just so many ways that this can go wrong.
Right, but the good thing is most things that are related to Unicode encoding, UTF-8 encoding, stuff like that. Most of those things are probably being worked out in most computer systems over the last few decades because of the prevalence of having to make software that works all over the world for every different language and all the different character sets and everything. So that problem is less of an issue, I think, in most cases you're going to run into today. The bigger problem, I think, is normalization.
Except for the parts where you care about it the most, like banks and healthcare, which are the most backwards and the most terrible systems. And unfortunately, money and health are probably the areas where this is going to annoy you the most. Starbucks is going to probably have your name in beautiful UTF encoded characters preserved everywhere across the whole entire thing. But your hospital might not even be able to fit your name because their field for last name only has 8 characters max. And and they're all ASCII, right? So things are slowly getting better. Unicode does make things better, but the older the system, your DMV, whatever, the worse things tend to be.
Yeah. The other thing that might help you out a little bit is that most people, especially people who would be entering your name into a database somewhere, don't know how to type M dashes or N dashes and don't even know what they are. We're lucky people can deal with things like periods in anything. Relying on the general public to type punctuation correctly, that's, again, this is going to be very error prone no matter how you do it. But most people don't know that there are these different dashes, and nor would they know how to type them. And usually, if you see somebody sending you a different dash, it is not usually because they hit option minus or whatever, or that they held down the hyphen key on their iOS keyboard and waited a second and got the other two dashes there. It's usually because they typed in two dashes in a row, and whatever they're typing in corrected it to an M dash for them. So this is like, no one's choosing to type these except nerds like me.
Yeah, and very often you will not know how to enter them, even if you're entering it yourself, because say you're not on a Mac. Like I came across this recently, someone was asking me, how do I type this stuff in Windows? And I was like, I don't know.
Do they still have those Alt 015 or whatever codes?
Type on the number pad.
Oh my God. But is that still like the only way to do it? They have to have fixed that by now.
It's Windows that has to still work, but
I'm sure it does.
I don't know the numerical code for an M dash. Do you off the top of my head? And if you're not a Mac user, you have no idea about all the option semicolon for an ellipsis and crap like that, right? So even if you are allowed to type it yourself, the keyboard doesn't have those keys on it. So you have to know how to enter them, and it's weird.
Thank you to our sponsors this week, Squarespace, Linode, and Mack Weldon. And thank you to our members who support us directly. You can join, please do, atv.fm/join. And we'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I had such a jerk store moment 2 weeks ago.
Tell me more. You were buying some dried meats?
No.
No, he had the, what is it? The spirit of the stairs. Someone tell me the French for that in the chat room, please.
What is that?
I have no idea what you're talking
L'esprit
about.
d'escalier, maybe? Did I beat the chat room to it?
I think you beat the world to it.
Yeah, seriously.
Jerk store moment. That's from a Seinfeld episode where George remembers a great comeback line, but he remembers it like a day later, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So the spirit of the stairs is, I think, a French saying of like, you remember the witty comeback as you're going down the stairs on your way out of the place where you were insulted.
Oh, okay. So 2 weeks ago, when I did my first thing about eating more vegetables, and you guys were berating me because you don't believe I like coconut, because I don't like dried toasted coconut flakes. And I'm sitting there in the edit the next morning. I'm like, how did I not fight back on this in the most obvious way? And then I thought to myself, how am I going to tell them this? I better save it for next week. Well, then next week comes around. That's last week's show. And we talk about the same topic again. And I totally forget to give this follow-up. And then the next morning editing that, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, how did I not?
Well, so hold on. I don't remember exactly what you said, but my recollection of the conversation was, you see, guys, I don't like coconut. I like this, and this, which all include coconut, but I really don't like coconut.
No, it's even worse than that.
No, you're misremembering it. But before we get to that, though, Marco, I would like to remind you of what happened in that Seinfeld episode. Do you remember how it ends?
I believe George eventually does get himself back into that group and gives his stupid jerk store thing, and it falls on its face miserably, which is how this is going to do. Maybe
a cautionary tale. So with that in mind, proceed and explain to how we should not have said that you really don't like coconut.
So my position on coconut is that I eat tons of coconut. I eat the coconut meat that you get pre-sliced at the grocery store, those little wedges of coconut. I drink a lot of coconut milk, and I have coconut-based cream and milk and stuff in lots of other things. Oh, and I like coconut water as well. Okay, so
you like coconut?
You two said that the only way you like coconut is shredded,
No,
toasted, dried.
The only way. I just said that is a very common way.
Okay, and then you told me that because I don't like the shredded, toasted, dried version, that it sounds like I don't like coconut. So, okay,
Yeah.
if you look at what is in a coconut, what's in it untouched, like you just take like the hair off, what's in the coconut naturally in the most basic state is all the stuff I like, and you guys are saying you only like this one like really processed version of it, and that like somehow I'm the one who doesn't like it. You don't like coconut. If you don't like coconut meat and coconut water and coconut milk, you don't like coconut.
We just like the other ones better. It's like saying I like steak tartare, but I don't like hamburger steak or any cooked form of meat. And you're like, oh, you only like this processed form of beef. I'm like, well, I'm going to say if you don't like hamburgers or steaks, you don't like beef. But I'm like, I like steak tartare, the raw version. In fact, that's the best version. I just go right up to the cow and I bite it. You like the uncooked coconut meat, but the most common form of coconut in this country is shredded and very often toasted. So Mounds and Almond Joy are shredded coconut.
The most common form of cheese in this country is American cheese. Are you saying that if somebody doesn't like American cheese, that they don't like cheese?
That's what I'm saying.
Cheese has more variety. Cheese has more variety than coconut, but
does it?
But if you,
I think the coconuts that I'm eating, that the form of the coconut I'm eating is pretty different from the form that you're eating.
But the most common form. You said you also didn't like German chocolate cake. Like, we're not just saying dried toasted coconut, although that is very common. But you also excluded tons of other forms of coconut that are way more common than just having the raw coconut. So I think if you're saying I don't like any of those, but I only like it raw, it's like only liking steak tartare, but insisting that you love beef.
No, I think I love coconut, and I think you guys don't. I think you guys love coconut candy.
I would say that I don't generally care for coconut. I think there are occasions where I like it. It's typically like, the number one thing I can think of is like coconut shrimp, which is, deep fried to smithereens, which is very American.
There's a lot of coconut.
Well, I will be the first to tell you that is not really coconut at that point. It is some other thing entirely.
Is it even shrimp at that point? I mean,
yeah, who knows?
It's mostly batter, like all fried things.
Yeah, right. But I think the analogy I use, because I don't think I particularly care for coconut, with a couple of exceptions. But the example I used is that I keep telling Aaron that I don't like caramel, however you pronounce it. But then I'll keep saying, oh, this is really good. And what is this? And I can't think of a specific example, but oh, that's, like chocolate covered in caramel. And then I'll say something else. Oh, wow, that was really good. What was that? Oh, it's such and such with caramel all over it. But I don't like caramel. And Aaron will just give me that look like, you think you don't, but you do. And so I would say that I don't particularly care for coconut, with an exception or two. And I think my coconut moment is that I would tell you I don't like caramel, but I think I actually do.
Yeah, I think, Marco, the thing you're missing, you're saying the essential raw form of it is the primal form, and I'm saying that the primal form is the form that it is most commonly found in, just like the cooked beef thing. That yes, beef is meat eaten raw, but generally it's cooked. And if you only like the raw form, you can make the argument that this is the most primal form. I like beef the most because I don't even need it to be cooked, but in this country that's weird. And I feel like coconut is in the same category. Most people have it shredded, sometimes dried, sometimes toasted, but certainly not just raw from the thing. And because you like it that way, you think that means you really like coconut, but I think it's because it's so uncommon that you like it in a weird way, and you don't like all of the much more common ways. It makes me think you're not as big a fan of coconut. If you really love coconut, you say, I like it in all forms. Like, if you really love beef, I love all forms of beef, from steak tartare to a great steak to a burger to everything you could possibly imagine. Steak smoothies. I love it. I think you'd have a stronger argument. I think you'd have a stronger argument there. But because you like a weird form of coconut the best and actively dislike the other ones, it makes you less of a coconut fan in my eyes.
Well, first of all, I would say my weird form of coconut is only weird in the US, and even then it's getting less weird over time as like all these dairy alternatives start involving coconut.
The coconut milk is probably getting less weird. The raw uncooked coconut staying weird.
What do people do with them?
I don't know if most people could even, if we said you have 1 hour to buy raw uncooked coconut, go do it. Most people couldn't accomplish that task because they wouldn't even know where to look for it. It's so uncommon. Next time you're in Kroger, Casey, see if they even have that in the store.
You assume I'm going into grocery stores these days. It's all clickless, baby.
Someone's got to go into grocery stores.
No, even Aaron doesn't. We do the deliver to your trunk thing. And
well, that's even better test. Have some Instacart person try to find this for you. You're like, what? You want a what? coconut. I mean, they'll bring you a bag of shredded coconut because that's the much more common form.
Can you, all kidding aside, can you not find like coconut in the produce section? I'm genuinely asking. I have no idea.
You can find whole coconuts sometimes.
Usually they have those. They usually have those like peeled ones that they have somehow removed like the dark brown hair on the outside, and it's, what's left is like this like tan like a cone. It's like a weird shape. Like they've like shaved off part of it. I haven't been brave enough to open one of those up yet, but I almost did last time, but they felt kind of soft.
Yeah, but Whole Foods is the only place that has for $1,000 a piece the pre-cut up pieces of coconut,
and they're delicious.
Because Whole Foods will pre-cut up any fruit for you and charge you $1,000 for it.
Is there anything that isn't $1,000 at Whole Foods?
No, some things like
pineapples.
Milk is a loss leader at Whole Foods. Milk is our Whole Foods is the place where we can get the cheapest milk.
Is
they
that
want
right?
to get you in the door, but do not buy any cut up fruit because it costs more than a car.
I think I might have told this story on ATP like literally 5 years ago, but one day when I was at my jobby job, I decided to go out to eat or like to grab some food from out, which is very unusual for me. Usually I brought like a sandwich or something. And I decided to go out and I worked very close to a Whole Foods. And so I went to Whole Foods and I went to the little hot bar and I was treating myself.
Well, there's your mistake on so many levels.
So hold on a million levels, but I'm all excited. I got a little of this, a little of that. And because I'm American, I grabbed, like a ladle full of mac and cheese, which of course weighs 85 tons and is a caloric
and the hard-boiled
bomb.
Eggs. The weight will kill you.
Exactly. And so I grabbed some mac and cheese and I went through the line. And of course, this was 10 years ago. My memory's shot. And so I'm probably making this up. But I genuinely
You're forgetting
think
that you told the story on the show before, but go on.
I said that I told the story in the show before. At least give me credit for that. So anyway, I go to check out and it was like $18 at the hot bar for just me.
And that's a bargain. You can't get one thing of cut up pineapple for that price.
That's how they get you. Like that isn't a Whole Food problem. That's every hot bar. Like when I used to work in Manhattan, like we'd go out to lunch a lot of days, and we'd occasionally go to a place that had one of those big hot bars, and like it's you put anything in there, $13, like anything.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, and it makes economic sense. Like both the hot bars and the pre-cut fruit, like it's not like they're gouging you for the hell of it. It's because you have to pay someone to cut up all that fruit, and then they end up throwing out tons of it because it doesn't keep, right? And so someone prepares all that food, cooks it, puts it in these dishes, sits it out there, and then half of it gets thrown away because nobody bought it. And so the one person who buys a salad pays for like a huge amount of food, and like. When you buy that thing of cut up fruit, it's the cost of the fruit, but then it's the time of the person cutting it up. And then there's the fact that the 7 other bins of pineapple are going to get thrown away in 2 days and no one's going to buy them. So you're buying all those too.
I think I'm mostly just upset because I had a pineapple today and it was really disappointing. Like, my latest
pineapples
pineapple.
We discussed the difficulty of trying to get one that is the correct ripeness. I did actually Google up on that to try to, but it was very difficult advice to follow.
And I knew when I was buying it because I was wearing a big mask and I was trying to dip the mask down to smell the bottom of the pineapple, and like I couldn't smell much. I'm like, well, can I not smell much because I just had a mask on my face for an hour, or can I not smell much? Yeah, well, right, and yeah, no, thank God that wasn't it, but yeah, so like I knew going into it, I'm like, this is going to be a pretty bland pineapple, but they were like on sale for like $2. I'm like, I got to try it just in case.
Isn't
I'll take
that
$2.
your hint right there?
$2 pineapple in January. Marco thinks I'm going to go for it.
I don't know anything about pineapple, and even I know that's a poor choice.
I mean, for $2, you can't go. I mean, it's probably worth the gamble because who knows?
Yeah.
You could have got lucky, but you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's not inedible. It's just not a good pineapple.
Yeah.
When you get a good one, it's so good. Because I like pineapples, John. I don't know if I find the natural form of it and I cut it up and I eat it and I like that.
Gosh.
Does that
Even now, I would say that if you like fresh pineapples but didn't like canned pineapples, I'd be like, you don't really like pineapple.
Now, I don't like pineapple flavored seltzer. Does that mean I don't like pineapple, John?
Pineapple flavor salsa is just carbonated water that they wave a pineapple over for 2 seconds.
That's like my martinis with vermouth. It's funny to me how genuinely upset you are about this, Marco.
I love coconut. Don't tell me I don't
This
love
has been
coconut.
annoying me for 2 weeks.
I have
noticed.
the purest coconut love. Your coconut love is processed, but I love the pure coconut.
No, but it was the gall of you telling me I don't like coconut because I eat it like the most direct way.
I explained. I think I explained my reasoning. I mean, you may disagree with it, but that was my thinking on that, and I think it is not an unreasonable way to think about who loves something more than someone else.
No, only you are agreeing on cheese.